The return to normalcy, or what passed for it, was like walking through a thick fog, each step uncertain, laden with the weight of Nicola's sacrifice. Their absence was a constant shadow, a haunting reminder of the cost of our victory in the Alaskan caves. I found myself replaying those final moments over and over, the decision that weighed heavily on my conscience. It was a burden I carried alone, in the silence of sleepless nights. In the weeks following our return, I tried to distance myself from the horrors we had faced, from the memories that clung to me like a second skin. But the more I tried to forget, the more vivid the nightmares became. They were no longer just flashes of terror. They felt like messages, fragments of a larger puzzle that was still incomplete. The dreams were always the same: dark caverns, the echoing cries of creatures, and a voice that I swore was Nicola's, whispering in a language I couldn't understand. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a morning like any other, the sun casting its warm glow over the quiet streets. I was sipping my coffee, trying to shake off the remnants of another sleepless night, when I noticed an envelope on my doorstep. It was plain, unmarked, save for my name written in a neat, unfamiliar hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and on it, a message that sent a shiver down my spine. "The gates are still open. Look to the parks. They are calling." The handwriting was strange, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow connected to Nicola. The message was cryptic, yet it resonated with an eerie sense of urgency. I spent the next few hours poring over maps and research on national parks, looking for any clue that might explain the message. That's when I stumbled upon something: a series of reports detailing unexplained phenomena in several national parks: Yosemite, Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, and others. Disappearances, strange weather patterns, sightings of unidentifiable creatures. It was too much to be a coincidence. The realization hit me like a wave. The battle we had fought in Alaska was just the beginning. There were other gateways, other rifts that had been opened to the nightmarish realms we had encountered. The thought of more creatures like the ones we had faced, possibly even worse, roaming our world was enough to reignite the fire within me. Nicola's sacrifice couldn't be in vain. I knew what I had to do. I packed my gear, leaving behind a life that no longer felt like mine. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with dangers I could only begin to imagine. But one thing was clear: I had to find these gateways and seal them, just as we had done in Alaska. As I set out on my journey, I couldn't shake the feeling that Nicola was with me, guiding me. Whether it was their spirit, or just my mind clinging to the past, it didn't matter. I was no longer just a soldier. I was a guardian, standing on the threshold between our world and the unknown horrors that lurked beyond. Yosemite was my first destination. As I drove towards the park, the familiar landscape did little to ease the growing sense of dread. Whatever secrets lay hidden within its boundaries, I was determined to uncover them and put an end to this nightmare, once and for all. The journey to Yosemite National Park was a mix of haunting memories and a grim sense of purpose. The roads that once offered scenic views now seemed like corridors leading into the unknown. As I approached the park, the air grew heavy, as if the nature itself was aware of the unnatural phenomena hidden within its embrace. Upon entering Yosemite, the atmosphere shifted. The park's majestic beauty was overshadowed by a palpable sense of unease. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the rustling leaves and distant animal calls sounding more like whispers and warnings. I set up a makeshift camp near a secluded area, where reports had pinpointed some of the strangest occurrences. The first night in Yosemite was restless. The forest was alive with sounds that didn't belong, unnatural, distorted, as if the wildlife itself was disturbed by something unseen. I kept my equipment close, especially the modified weapons we had used in Alaska, dipped in ash as per the indigenous tribe's advice. They had proven effective against the creatures before, and I hoped they would again. Dawn brought a deceptive calm. As I ventured deeper into the park, the beauty of Yosemite unveiled itself. but so did its hidden horrors. I stumbled upon a clearing where the air felt denser, and the colors of the environment were oddly saturated. It was here that I encountered my first sign of the otherworldly presence, a deer, or at least what used to be one. Its form was twisted, its features grotesque, as if it had been partially morphed into something else. The sight of it sent a chill down my spine, confirming my worst fears. Realizing the gateway was near, I prepared myself for what might come next. The air grew colder, the forest around me seemed to close in. Then it appeared, a creature, humanoid but grotesquely elongated, its skin an ashen gray, eyes empty and void of humanity. It moved towards me with a disjointed, haunting grace, a predator confident in its domain. The confrontation was inevitable. The creature lunged, emitting a guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the very air. I fired my weapon, the ash-coated bullets finding their mark. The creature stumbled, a shriek piercing the air as it retreated into the shadows of the trees. I knew then that this was just a scout, a warning of what lay deeper in the park. Gathering my resolve, I followed the creature's path, each step taking me further into the heart of Yosemite. The deeper I went, the more the natural beauty of the park twisted into something unrecognizable, a landscape tainted by the presence of the other dimension. It was clear that the gateway here was open, and if left unchecked, the creatures would continue to seep into our world. I found the gateway by a secluded lake, its waters dark and still, reflecting a distorted version of the sky above. The air around it vibrated with an otherworldly energy, the boundary between our world and theirs thinning. Drawing on every ounce of my training and experience, I prepared to seal the gateway, knowing that this was just the first of many. As the sun set on Yosemite, casting long shadows across the landscape, I initiated the ritual to close the rift. The process was grueling, demanding every bit of my focus and strength. And when it was done, the gateway sealed. I collapsed, exhausted but victorious. In the quiet that followed, I knew that my journey was far from over. Yosemite was just the beginning. There were more gateways, more parks to save. With the first gateway sealed, I gathered my gear and set my sights on the next location. The battle against these unseen horrors was just beginning, and I was the only one who could fight it. With the gateway in Yosemite sealed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the tip of the iceberg. The drive to Yellowstone was long and gave me too much time to think. The road seemed endless, a metaphor for the journey I had embarked upon. Each mile was a step deeper into a world I was only beginning to understand. Upon arriving in Yellowstone, I headed straight for the local ranger station. If anyone knew the secrets of these parks, it would be the rangers who had spent years patrolling their depths. I introduced myself as a researcher studying unusual wildlife activity, a cover story that seemed plausible enough. The rangers were hesitant at first, but as I shared my observations from Yosemite, their skepticism turned to concern. One ranger, a seasoned veteran with deep lines etched into his weathered face, pulled me aside. In hushed tones, he spoke of strange occurrences that didn't make it to official reports. Inexplicable weather patterns, sightings of creatures that defied description, and a series of unexplained disappearances. He mentioned specific areas in the park where these phenomena were most concentrated, areas that seemed to align with my own research into the gateways. Armed with this new information, I spent the night poring over maps and historical records of Yellowstone. It became clear that these gateways were not random. They were connected to specific geological features, ancient, powerful, and deeply rooted in the Earth's crust. These were places where the veil between worlds was thin, where the boundaries of our reality blurred. The next day, I set out to explore these areas, each step taking me further into the heart of Yellowstone. The park's natural wonders, from its steaming geysers to its sprawling canyons, were a stark contrast to the unnatural horrors I was seeking. As I ventured deeper, the familiar signs appeared. Distorted flora and fauna, a heavy oppressive air, and a sense of being watched by unseen eyes. I realized then that my mission was larger than I had imagined. It wasn't just about sealing the gateways, it was about understanding them, uncovering their purpose, and discovering how they could be permanently closed. Each park held a piece of this puzzle, a part of a larger, more ominous picture. As night fell on Yellowstone, I found myself standing before another gateway. Its presence was a wound in the landscape, a tear in the fabric of our world. I knew what I had to do, but with each gateway sealed, I could feel a part of myself being drained. It was a battle not just against the creatures from beyond, but against the growing darkness within me. I sealed the gateway in Yellowstone, the ritual becoming more familiar, yet no less taxing. The night was filled with the sounds of the park, both natural and unnatural. In the silence that followed, I knew my journey was far from over. There were more parks to visit, more secrets to uncover. The fight to save our world from the horrors beyond continued, and I was the only line of defense. My time in Yellowstone was marked by a growing sense of unease. The park's vastness hid its secrets well, but the unnatural phenomena I'd encountered were becoming increasingly hard to ignore. Geysers erupted at odd intervals, the wildlife behaved erratically, and at night, the air was filled with a chorus of unidentifiable and haunting sounds. As I delved deeper into the park, I found myself drawn to a particularly remote area, known for its thermal activity. It was here that the strange occurrences seemed most concentrated. The ground was warm under my feet, a reminder of the volcanic forces churning beneath the surface. It was a fitting metaphor for the hidden dangers lurking unseen. In this surreal landscape, where steam rose from the earth like ghostly apparitions, I encountered something wholly unexpected. A figure, seemingly part of the land itself, emerged from the mist. Its presence was ancient, its eyes holding the weight of centuries. The creature, or guardian, as I came to think of it, spoke in a voice that resonated deep within me. It warned of the imbalance caused by the gateways, speaking of an ancient pact between the worlds that had been broken. I realized then that Yellowstone was more than just a location for another gateway. It was a nexus of natural and supernatural forces. The Guardian, though cryptic in its words, seemed to hint at a deeper understanding of what was at stake. It spoke of the gateways as wounds, tears that needed to be healed, not just sealed. Armed with this new understanding, I pressed on. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous, the geothermal activity creating a labyrinth of steam and scalding waters. It was in this inhospitable environment that I found the gateway. Unlike the one in Yosemite, this rift was volatile, its energies erratic and dangerous. The process of sealing this gateway was far more challenging. The land itself seemed to resist my efforts, and the creatures that emerged from the rift were more aggressive, more desperate. It was as if the very act of closing this gateway was causing a backlash from the other side. After a grueling struggle, the rift finally closed, the land around it settling into an uneasy calm. I was left exhausted both physically and mentally. The encounter with the Guardian and the difficulties in sealing the rift had taken a toll on me. As I made my way out of Yellowstone, I knew that my journey was far from over. Each park held its own challenges, its own secrets. The Guardian's words echoed in my mind, a puzzle that needed solving. There was more at play than just closing the gateways. There was a balance that needed to be restored. The road ahead was daunting, but I was determined to see it through. The fate of our world hung in the balance, and I was the only one who could tip the scales. With each step, I was becoming more than just a soldier. I was becoming a guardian of the threshold between our world and the unknown horrors that lay beyond. Leaving Yellowstone behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that each park was a piece of a larger, more complex puzzle. The Guardian's cryptic message about a broken pact and the need for balance lingered in my mind. As I journeyed towards the Grand Canyon, a sense of foreboding grew with each mile. The thought of what awaited me there was both daunting and compelling. Upon arriving at the Grand Canyon, I was struck by the stark contrast between its natural grandeur and the sense of something sinister lurking beneath the surface. The vast chasms and towering rock formations seemed to hide secrets in their shadows. It was here, amidst this natural wonder, that the pattern I had been sensing began to take a more tangible form. The anomalies in the parks weren't random. They were interconnected, forming a network that spanned the entire country. My nights were filled with research and mapping, trying to decipher the connections between the parks. The more I delved into it, the clearer it became that these gateways were aligned with ancient ley lines, channels of the Earth's energy that had been recognized by civilizations throughout history. It was as if these gateways were nodes in a vast unseen network, a web of cosmic significance. An unexpected development came when I encountered another survivor from a military team similar to mine. Her name was Alex, and she had been investigating these phenomena independently. Her expertise in geology and her first-hand experiences with the creatures provided valuable insights. Together, we ventured into the depths of the Grand Canyon, where the anomalies had been most prevalent. Our journey into the canyon was fraught with danger. The deeper we went, the more the landscape seemed to warp around us. The rocks appeared to shift and change, creating disorienting mazes that seemed to defy natural laws. It was in one of these twisted labyrinths that we encountered the gateway. The creatures that guarded it were unlike any we had faced before. They seemed to be part of the canyon itself, emerging from the rock walls and ground. Their attacks were relentless, pushing both Alex and me to our limits. The fight to reach the gateway was a brutal reminder of the stakes we were playing for. Sealing this gateway felt different. There was a resistance, a pushback from the other side that was almost palpable. With each step of the ritual, the air around us crackled with energy, the ground shaking as if in protest. But we persevered, driven by a determination that went beyond mere survival. As the gateway closed, a momentary peace settled over the Grand Canyon, but it was a fleeting respite. Alex and I knew that this was far from over. The pattern of the gateways, the ley lines, and the words of the Guardian in Yellowstone, they all pointed to something bigger, a looming threat that we were only just beginning to understand. Our next destination was already clear. We needed to visit more parks, to unravel more of this cosmic puzzle. The journey ahead was daunting, but with each gateway sealed, we were one step closer to understanding the true nature of this threat and how to stop it once and for all. The journey to the next national park was filled with a tense anticipation. Alex and I had become a team, united by a common goal and shared experiences. We pored over maps and reports, trying to predict where the next gateway might be. Our path led us to the Everglades, a vast network of wetlands and forests, where reports of unexplained phenomena had recently spiked. As we navigated through the dense mangroves and murky waters of the Everglades, the feeling of being in an alien world grew stronger. The thick foliage and the constant buzz of insects created an oppressive atmosphere, a stark reminder that we were intruders in this natural labyrinth. Our first encounter in the Everglades was not with the creatures, but with a group of people who seemed out of place in the wilderness. Cloaked in secrecy, they were members of a cult that worshipped the beings from the other dimension. Their belief was that these creatures were gods, heralding a new era for humanity. Their presence in the park was no coincidence. They were attempting to prevent us from sealing the gateway. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to our mission. It wasn't just the creatures we had to worry about. Now, there were humans actively working against us. The cult's motives were shrouded in mystery, but their determination was clear. They believed that by keeping the gateways open, they were fulfilling a higher purpose. Our search for the getaway in the Everglades became a race against time. We had to find and seal it before the cult could intervene. The task was daunting, the park vast and treacherous. As we delved deeper, we encountered signs of the gateway's influence. Distorted wildlife, areas where time seemed to warp, and a pervasive sense of dread. The confrontation with the creatures at the gateway was inevitable. They were more aggressive than ever, as if sensing that their connection to our world was under threat. The battle was fierce, testing both our physical and mental limits. Amidst the chaos, we completed the ritual, sealing the gateway with a sense of urgency, fueled by the knowledge that the cult was close on our heels. In the aftermath of the closure, we discovered documents left behind by the cult. They contained cryptic references to a larger plane, a network of gateways that extended beyond the national parks. The implications were chilling. The cult had knowledge of other gateways, perhaps even beyond the borders of the United States. As we left the Everglades, the weight of our discoveries hung heavily upon us. It was becoming increasingly clear that we were up against a far-reaching conspiracy that spanned beyond the creatures and the gateways. There were layers of secrets and manipulations involving not just the cult but possibly elements within the government. The puzzle was becoming more complex, but our resolve was unwavering. We had to continue our mission to uncover the truth behind the gateways and the forces that sought to exploit them. The road ahead was uncertain, but our path was clear. We would travel to the next park, armed with new knowledge and a determination to stop the threat that loomed over our world. Our next destination was the rugged wilderness of Alaska. The journey was daunting, a return to the place where it all began. As Alex and I prepared, the weight of our previous encounters in the national parks, with both the creatures and the cult, bore heavily on us. This time the stakes felt even higher, as if Alaska would be the climax of our harrowing journey. The Alaskan wilderness was unforgiving, a vast expanse of snow and ice that seemed to stretch into infinity. The isolation was profound, a stark reminder of how far we had come from the world we once knew. We trekked through the frozen landscape, aware that this was the territory of the most powerful gateway we had yet to face. Our progress was hindered not just by the harsh conditions, but also by the palpable sense of being watched. It wasn't long before our fears were confirmed. We were ambushed, not by the creatures, but by members of the cult, their determination to stop us more fervent than ever. Among them was a figure I recognized, a government agent who had been involved in the initial investigation into the gateways. His betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow, a sign of how deep the conspiracy ran. The confrontation was intense, a battle not just against the cultists but also against the elements. But we prevailed, driven by the knowledge that the fate of our world hung in the balance. With the cultists defeated, we pressed on, the gateway drawing closer with every step. The gateway in Alaska was like nothing we had encountered before. It pulsed with a raw, primal energy, a breach in the very fabric of our reality that seemed to scream for closure. The creatures that guarded it were relentless, their attacks a frenzied attempt to keep their connection to our world open. The ritual to seal the gateway pushed us to our limits. The energies at play were chaotic, almost sentient in their resistance. But as we completed the final steps, a sense of finality washed over us. The gateway sealed with a shudder that rippled through the land, a sign that this connection, at least, had been closed. Exhausted but triumphant, we knew that our journey was not yet over. The documents we had recovered from the cult hinted at other gateways, other battles to be fought. The network of gateways was more extensive than we had imagined, and the forces arrayed against us were formidable. But for the first time, there was a sense of hope. We had proven that the gateways could be sealed, that the creatures could be pushed back. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with dangers both known and unknown. Yet we were resolved to continue, to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy, and to protect our world from the horrors that lay beyond. As we left the frozen wilderness of Alaska, the realization that our fight was far from over was tempered by the knowledge that we were no longer alone in this battle. We had each other, and we had the determination to face whatever lay ahead. The final gateways awaited, and we were ready. After the closure of the Alaska Gateway, Alex and I found ourselves on a brief respite, reflecting on our harrowing journey. The once overwhelming silence of the Alaskan wilderness now seemed like a peaceful solace compared to the chaos we had faced. But this peace was short-lived. The reality of our situation was ever present. The gateways we had closed were just a fraction of a much larger, more complex network. Our next steps were unclear. The documents we had recovered from the cult hinted at other gateways, potentially more dangerous than those we had encountered. There was a sense that we had only scratched the surface of a global mystery, one that extended far beyond the borders of the United States and into the unknown. During our return journey, our discussions often turned to the implications of our discoveries. The existence of these gateways and the creatures they harbored was a reality that, if exposed, would change everything. We grappled with the decision of whether to bring this information to light or to continue our fight in the shadows. Our arrival back into civilization was jarring. The world continued to turn, oblivious to the dangers lurking just beyond their perception. As we walked among the people, the weight of the knowledge we carried felt like a heavy cloak, isolating us from the rest of humanity. The nightmares continued, but they were different now. They were no longer just echoes of our past encounters, but visions of what might still be out there, waiting in the dark, unsealed gateways. These dreams served as a grim reminder of our duty, a call to action that we could not ignore. In the days that followed, our plan began to take shape. We would continue our mission, traveling to the locations indicated in the cult's documents. We would seek out allies, those who had the skills and the courage to stand with us against the darkness. Our fight was far from over, and we needed to be prepared. As I sat down to document our journey, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease about the future. The battle we had fought was just the beginning. The gateways we had closed were merely the first skirmishes in a war that spanned dimensions. I knew that our story needed to be told, if not to the world, then to those who would join us in our fight. The truth about the gateways and the creatures needed to be understood and faced with open eyes. We were the first line of defense, the guardians standing between our world and the unknown horrors that sought to breach it. As I penned the final words, a determination settled within me. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges and dangers we could not yet fully comprehend. But one thing was clear: we would face it head-on, with every ounce of our strength and courage. The fight against the lurking darkness was a torch we would carry into the uncertain future, a beacon of hope in a world that was yet to understand the true nature of the shadows that danced at its edges.